How do organisms reproduce? Session 5. In this module, we are going to learn about fragmentation and regeneration. Hi dear children, welcome to the next session on the chapter How do organisms reproduce? In the last module, we had learned about the asexual reproduction by fission, which is done by unicellular organisms. Now let me ask you a question. Do multicellular organisms reproduce asexually? Yes. Organisms with simple organizations reproduce asexually by a method called as fragmentation. So fragmentation is a type of asexual reproduction in which the parent, once it has undergone maturity, breaks itself into number of fragments, number of pieces, and each piece or fragment grows into a new individual, and that is called as fragmentation. Fragmentation is very common in Spirogyra. We must be very familiar with Spirogyra. It is usually seen in the water bodies, and it is termed as water silk. The common name is water silk. And Spirogyra has the capacity to reproduce asexually by means of fragmentation, in which the structure of Spirogyra is long filamentous thread. You can see the structure of Spirogyra. They are long filamentous thread-like structures, and each filament divides itself into a number of fragments, and each fragment grows into a new individual. So there are 3 steps involved in fragmentation. In the first step, the parent organism reaches the maximum size or maximum maturity, and then it divides itself into number of fragments. And the third step, each fragment develops into a new individual. All multicellular organisms reproduce by such a method. Some multicellular organisms, the organization of cells is very simple, whereas in some multicellular organisms, the organization is quite complex. Cells are specialized to form tissues, tissues get organized to form organs, and these organs are positioned in different parts of the body to perform specific functions. So cell by cell division is not practical in such multicellular organisms. The more complex the organization is, the more complex will be the process of reproduction. Is it clear? So, multicellular organisms in which they have complex organization, they have a bit more complex process of reproduction. Dear children, imagine that you are having your favorite chocolate in your hand, and you are supposed to divide it into half and give the other half to your brother or sister. How much you would wish that the 2 halves had the capacity to regrow, to grow itself into 2 complete chocolates. Isn't it? Is it practical? Or will it take place in reality? Never. Never in the case of these 2 chocolates. You cannot have the halves growing into a complete chocolate. But this does happen in multicellular organisms. Haven't you seen your cut nails regenerating, regrowing? Isn't it? You can see once you cut your nails, after some days you can see it regrow. Even your hair, isn't it? And you have an organ in your body which has the capacity to regrow. Which is that organ? Yes, your liver. You would have surely seen a lizard whose tail has been cut, and after some days we can see that its tail would have regrown. And this phenomenon or this process is called as regeneration. And this process of regeneration is a method or mode of asexual reproduction in some fully differentiated multicellular organisms. And such organisms has the ability to produce a new organism from their body parts. To be more precise, if an individual has its body cut off or broken into pieces, from each piece, a new individual gets regenerated. And this type of reproduction or regeneration takes place in organisms like Hydra, flat worms like Planaria, which is seen in fresh water and slow running water. In this picture, we can see Planaria, which is getting cut into 3 pieces, and from each piece new organism is growing or gives from a single planaria which is cut into three parts. Three new planaria has been reproduced asexually. Is it clear for you? And how does this regeneration takes place? Is it taking place just in a very random fashion? No. In order to regenerate, the body of such organism has specialized cells, and these cells are called as regenerative cells. And these regenerative cells has the capacity to proliferate and produce a large number of cells. And these cells which has proliferated undergoes differentiation. They have to take up the function of the shape of that particular lost part. So it gets differentiated to form specific cells and tissues and organs. And this takes place in a very sequenced fashion or sequence order, and this is called as development. So regeneration is the type of reproduction in which an individual whose body parts has been cut off or broken, and from that body part a new individual is produced, and it is seen in simple organisms like hydra and planaria with the help of specialized cells called as regenerative cells. The Spirogyra, seen in water bodies, reproduces by fragmentation, in which the Spirogyra breaks up into smaller pieces upon maturation, and each piece grows up into a new individual. Regeneration involves the development of new individual from body parts. Consider fully differentiated organisms like hydra and planaria. The body gets cut or broken down into many pieces, and each piece grows into a separate individual. And for this regenerative process, organisms have specialized cells called as regenerative cells that proliferate into a mass of cells. The regenerative cells proliferate into a mass of cells, and from these mass of cells, different cells changes to become various cell types and tissues.